boys and girls, it's time for another little math talk about measurement. You know, boys and girls, when I say the word measurement, the first thing that comes to my mind is a ruler. Is that what comes to your mind? There's a good chance that's what you think about. But did you know there's many different ways to measure? The type of measurement we're going to talk about right now is something called capacity. That's a big word, isn't it? I know it sounds a little bit like city at the end. But this doesn't really have to do anything to do with the city or the country. Capacity is a type of liquid measure or a type of measure that tells how much something can hold. Have you been to the grocery store with your parents and seen a container that looks like that? That's called a gallon container of milk. Maybe your family just gets a small quart container of milk. Or maybe you're thinking about our lunch containers with milk. They're even smaller yet. And something that's smaller than that is called a cup. Yep, I think a cup is just about 8 ounces, if I remember correctly. All right, boys and girls. Well, there's different things to talk about with capacity. Let's explore that idea a little bit more in one of my favorite ways, by reading a book. And the name of this book is pretty simple. It's Capacity. Let's start reading it. Have you ever played with damp sand and packed it into a pail and made a sand castle? Does the sand take the shape of the pail? If I'm lucky, it does. A pail, a thimble, an egg, cup, a jar, a box, they are all containers. Containers hold things. Inside a container, there is space. The space inside a container can hold liquids, solids, or just air. See all those containers? They all can hold things. There's space inside of them. Here are some containers. If you fill each of them with water. Can you guess which would hold the most and which would hold the least? How many of you do that for fun sometimes? Do you ever take a play bath and your mom might go into her Tupperware cupboard and give you all kinds of different containers? Some are big, some are small, some have different shapes. Maybe she gets out the measuring cups and lets you play with those. That used to be something I used to do to keep my kids busy for a while. And then they'd get in the tub and they'd pour from one container to the other. And then I'd say, don't pour it out of the tub. Keep it in the tub. And then they'd try to pour it on each other. All right, let's see what happens next. It is sometimes easy to guess which container will hold the most water when they are different sizes. It's much more difficult to guess when the containers look almost the same. See, if we look at these containers, I would say that this one would hold the most and the little tiny thimble would hold the least. But if I'm looking at these containers, I'm not sure what I would say. This one looks a little wider, but this one looks taller. They're going to hold about the same amount probably. Guessing can be difficult. Which of these two containers holds the most? We must measure to find out. See the two containers there? Pour water from the jug into the dish. What does this tell you? Can you see? It's probably hard to see in the picture. But look at how much higher this water goes in this pan than in this pan. Now collect some empty containers. How can you tell which one will hold the most water and which will hold the least? Could you do a science experiment with those? Could you fill those up and then dump them into a different container and see how high it goes? The different container would have to be the same for both the cups, right? You'd have to empty it out or have two that are the same, or it wouldn't be an equal comparison. We do not have to use water. We can use sand or marbles instead. The sand fills all the space in the jar. Do the marbles fill all the space? No, they don't, do they? Look at, there's little spots in between where there's some air. So that's a little bit different. We need to measure exactly. We may use the liter as a standard measurement for liquids, or we may use pints, quarts, and gallons. Many drinks are sold both ways, so this is a kind of measurement. So when we're in the United States, a lot of times we use words like cups and gallons and quarts. But if you were in Canada or doing science, or at many parts of the world, you would use the metric system, which is a little bit different. And look at, here's other things measured by how much liquid is inside of them. A liter is quite a large measure. Smaller quantities are measured in deciliters or milliliters. A quart is quite a large measure also. Smaller quantities are measured in pints, cups, and ounces. So what they are telling you is there are different size measurements for measuring different things. 10 deciliters makes a liter. 1,000 milliliters makes a liter. 2 cups make a pint. 2 pints make a quart. So there's 10 deciliters in a liter. Kind of sounds like how many cents there are in a penny, doesn't it? Standard measures are important. The ingredients for a cake have to be mixed in the right quantities. So if you're going to bake a cake, can you just say, oh, I'm going to put some milk, I'm going to put some oil, I'm going to put some eggs, and just going to stir it all up? No, you have to measure. Yep, if you put in too much liquid, your cake might be runny. If you don't put enough, it might taste very dry. Garden fertilizers have to be carefully measured. If you put the wrong amount on, it might kill the grass instead of helping the grass. Medicines must be measured carefully when they are made and when we take them. That's important. Just a little bit of a difference in medicine could make someone very sick. Standard measures help us to measure exactly. When a driver buys a liter or a gallon of gasoline, she knows exactly how much she will get wherever she buys it. The gasoline runs from the pump into the car's tank. When the tank is full, it will hold no more gas. Capacity is the word used to describe the most that a container can hold. So if you say it's at capacity, you can't put any more in. Some containers are very large. This tanker holds many liters or gallons. These drums hold chemicals. Which container has the greater capacity, the tanker or the drums? What do you think? Why don't you tell us? Tyler, what are you thinking about? Even though these drums are very big, the tanker is much bigger, isn't it? So we would say it has a greater capacity. It holds more. Good. Being able to measure capacity is important. What might happen if this ship, if too much coal were loaded in it? See that? They're loading coal into a ship. What do you think could happen if they didn't measure and they just kept putting more and more, excuse me, that's a big yawn, more and more coal into the ship? What could happen to that? Hunter, what do you think? Yes, it could be too heavy and the ship could sink. That would not be good. What might happen to this reservoir if too much water went into it? Boys and girls, a reservoir is a big word. It describes an area that holds water. Sometimes they want to make sure there's enough water in an area, so they might have like a man-made lake that holds water just in case they need it. But if the reservoir got too full, and if it's being held back, it might break what they build to hold it back, and there might be an enormous flood. Capacity is not the same as weight. The stones fill the jar and so does water. Which do you think is heavier? No, they don't tell us in this one, but I noticed there's a lot of air spaces in between these stones. Maybe that will make the jar heavier. It could. All right, well, capacity is a word we use to describe space. And when the space is empty, see this empty space? Yep, this is filled up. The capacity is how many cookies will fit into that space. Well, boys and girls, today we talked about a measurement called capacity. And we learned that capacity tells us how much space a container will hold. Maybe you can ask mom or dad or grandma or grandpa if you could take a little play bath and maybe play with some different size containers and see if you could do some exploring with capacity. If you do, make sure you clean up your mess. I know, your family's getting tired, aren't they? All right, you have fun with learning about math.